Driven. We are Mike and Mike, and we're very pleased to welcome to our studio now the co-author of the memoir written by John Saunders shortly before his death, Playing Hurt, My Journey from Despair to Hope. John U. Bacon is in our studio, and those of you just watching with us on television saw a little piece that Bob Lee put together about John. And John U. Bacon, first off, welcome. And you mentioned that as you watched that, it sort of made you emotional to see it and hear Bob's words.
Bob did a great job, as usual, and it's hard to believe that he's gone.
This, I think, for people that saw John and what he did here, and just knowing him from his time at ESPN, I would imagine, and from your side of it, they would be shocked to read this and hear of all the things that he went through.
Even his closest friends, Bob Lee and Chris Berman from 30 years ago, those guys are shocked. Some friends of his from high school are shocked. John told almost nobody the whole story. Even Wanda, his wife, found out a few things in this book that she did not know. Look, John went through physical abuse, sexual abuse, self-mutilation, self-medication, concussions, overarched by depression throughout, and he did not talk to many people about it.
When did you first, when did he approach you? When did you start talking about doing this?
We met 20 years ago at a charity hockey game, actually. I'm a high school hockey player of little note. On my left were the Hanson brothers. On my right was John Saunders, so I'll talk to him, I guess. So we started talking 20 years ago and kept it up. We're going to do a book on Madison Square Garden, actually. And then in the midst of this, in 2011, he stands up too quickly on the set of ABC College Football. He blacks out. He falls backwards. He bangs his head so hard he split his head open, basically. And that put him into Mount Sinai for 6 weeks to relearn how to walk and talk and read and write. And you know, concussion victims and whatnot, this is quite severe. And that's when John and I started talking about doing this. It had to be his idea. You can't push a man to write a book like this. And we had checked it out with his doctors to make sure it was helping him, not hurting him, to write it. But we started in 2012.
And when you started this, and you're right, it had to be from his side of it. Was he open right off the bat, or did it take a bit to really get it going?
The former, actually, which when you read the book, you're going to be shocked. You'd be more shocked to sit down with John and have him just spill all the stuff, you know, without any compunction whatsoever. And I think that probably comes from 15, 20 years of therapy where he's used to talking about his feelings. John, as you know, is a very sharp guy, can articulate a wide range of things. But he pulled no punches in this book or in person.
Why do you think, sorry, Greeny, why do you think he didn't, he was open to you, to, I guess you get to a point. Why do you think he wasn't open to others earlier?
That's a very good question, and one I never asked him, but if I had to guess, it's two things. One, he loved his job here immensely, and ESPN was extremely good to him. He said this was his best drug, because while you do what you guys are doing, and no one but John and a few others know how complicated your jobs are, there's a guy talking into the earpiece right now telling him what to do next. He feared losing that work. That's one thing. And second of all, this is sports. As Joe Biden, the vice president, said to John on a train on the way back from a conference at the White House, you can come out as a gay football player, you can come out as a gay basketball player. You can't come out as a depressed athlete while you're playing, because they won't trust you, you might lose your job. So I think John was genuinely afraid of that, and he was a tough guy. So this is all on his mind, I believe.
John U. Bacon is in our studio, again, co-author of John Saunders' memoir, which is called Playing Hurt, My Journey from Despair to Hope, and it's available now. Do you believe that the process of writing the book, which obviously took years, was therapeutic for him?
From Dr. Carolyn Douglas, who's quoted a lot in the book, we know that it was. And John told me that as well. And that was vital to me. We said to the very last minute, if this is not helping you, we'll pull the contract, we'll do whatever, because obviously putting John in a tailspin is not worth anything. But it really was helpful, and my heartbreak now, of course, is that this should be him in this chair naturally, doing the victory lap, getting the big bear hug from the world. But even the manuscript being accepted meant so much to John, that he could come clean, and the biggest goal was to help the millions of others who suffer from this.
What was the hardest thing for him to talk about to you?
His father. With all the other things going on, his dad's abuse would get him choked up, even at age 60. And what that told me, what John said, is that the bruises wear off. The sense of worthlessness that you get from being abused is something you fight the rest of your life. Because a 5-year-old, a 10-year-old is not going to blame his father, even though he should. You can't. That's the guy in charge of your house. You blame yourself. And you internalize that, and even in your 50s and 60s, that's still hard to shake.
I think a lot of people look at this. Depression is a disease. I've talked about it on the air many times. And we see stories that don't end happily, and they wonder how is it that someone can appear, as public a figure as John Saunders was, can appear one way and in reality be suffering so much. How did you see that dichotomy in him?
Both are true. I'll say that what you saw on TV was not, you know him quite well, I'm sure both you did. It was not phony. It was really John. It was only one part of him, tip of an iceberg. John said about this work, it is so demanding that it was the greatest drug he could have because you can't be anywhere else when you're doing this. Now, when you hand out the football in New Orleans to Nick Saban, you go home to your hotel room and you cry for an hour. That's what John would do. But amazingly kept those two things largely separate. I think historically they say men have an easier time compartmentalizing their lives than women. That's a stereotype, granted. But John was exceedingly good at that.
He was also exceedingly good at hockey. He wanted to be a pro hockey player, and he wasn't for a variety of reasons. How much do you think that added to all of this?
The concussions added quite a bit, and we know that discussion quite well, of course, on your show. What John made clear is that concussions themselves do not necessarily make you depressed. It's not a direct link. But when you can't walk and talk and read and write, and you have no idea if you're going to get these things back, all right, then you might get depressed. John, after this accident in 2011 on the set, John had an IQ of 154. Now he's down to 102. They gave him 10 pegs and 10 holes. It took him 6 minutes to put 10 pegs into 10 holes. This is not a dumb guy. And that will make you very depressed. So the hockey definitely figured in quite a bit. And John had, they say if you had 10 concussions, you probably had 20. And John, if you read the book, he was he was not a finesse player, let's put it that way. Yeah. So.
And so more on that, because for those of us who haven't had the chance to read it yet, I have the copy and I'm looking forward to reading it. How about the hockey career and what that meant to him and how, in your mind, as one who knew him and went through this process, this therapeutic process of writing the book, where did hockey figure into all of it?
Strongly. And that was his first big dream, was not ESPN, was being a pro hockey player. His brother Bernie made it to the NHL, actually, for 10 games with the Nordiques. John was a very good player, coached by Jacques Demers as a junior player, actually, as well as his brother. But John was also into self-medication at that point, even, as he says, dealt drugs out of his locker in high school. So that held him back some. And then concussions, injuries, shoulders, you name it, you know how this stuff goes. But that, when he lost that, very quickly, broadcasting took over. He needed something else for confirmation, for validation. Without his dad, his support, it was great to feel a crowd cheering for you, and now it's great to hear an audience cheering for you as well. He starts out in Ajax, Ontario, as Country John Saunders on Sunday morning playing Baptist sermons. I'm not making that part up.
So in sitting with him and talking to him time after time for this, what was your biggest takeaway?
Two things, and I don't suffer from depression, so I'm translating for John, and that was the trickiest thing. One, as Mike already said, it's a disease. And trying to cure depression by saying, suck it up, works about as well as cold medicine for cancer. It's far deeper. You need help. And second thing is you can get help. And there's plenty of help out there. The success rate of treatment for depression is very high, but you have to get the treatment for depression for that to work. And men, military guys, athletes are the three categories that are least likely to ask for help.
And so what do you believe, or what do you hope, and I know that you mentioned a moment ago, it should have been John sitting in that chair talking about this book, but what do you hope beyond that people will take from this about him? We understand spreading the word about the challenges of depression, but how about him, about John, about the man that he was?
All this aside, John was a really good guy. And he's not just a guy with a disease, not just a victim here by any means. You can have all this. You can be a diabetic and be a great guy, obviously. You can have this disease, and he was a great husband, as you know, a great father. That was his biggest fear, is not being repeating his dad's mistakes. He did not. And he's a ton of fun to be around, and believe it or not, about every 5 or 10 pages you might laugh. John, as you know, had a great belly laugh, even while talking about the worst things in his life. At my home in Ann Arbor, here in New York, during our many visits, John would make me laugh every 15 or 20 minutes. That is a remarkable man.
Again, the book is called Playing Hurt, My Journey from Despair to Hope. John U. Bacon is the co-author of the memoir of our friend John Saunders. And as I mentioned a few moments ago, also in John's memory, over $600,000 have been raised so far for pediatric cancer through the V Foundation. He was a founding member of the board of directors of the V Foundation, very active with that, and we know how incredibly important that was to him in his life as well. John, thank you for coming and for sharing this story. We appreciate it very much. Mike, it's hard to, you know, it's hard to really know what to say in circumstances
It really
like
is
this.
because it's nothing we knew. I mean, even his closest friends didn't know a lot of this. So while we knew him, weren't in the inner circle of him. But if those people didn't even know, I mean, this is all was shocking to me.
To all of us.
To hear and read all of this.
To all of us. Again, the book is available now. I'm definitely looking forward to reading it immediately. Okay, we'll take a short break. We'll come back with a whole lot more here on Mike and Mike. Let's do a word now from Shell. You know, there are a few different ways that you can get rewarded. One of them is you can get a